Sources have said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken a bold step in enhancing Africa's voice on the international stage and in shaping the future of our shared world. He has written to G20 counterparts to propose that the African Union be given full membership at the upcoming Delhi summit of G20 as requested by them. So the African leadership requesting full membership of the G20, the summit of which will be held in September this year in New Delhi, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi Abhishek taking the bold step of requesting that this be granted. Your thoughts? We're trying to get in touch with Republic Senior Executive Editor on this as well. The African Union had earlier made a request, and now we find that the Prime Minister, that's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has taken the bold step as the host for the G20 summit this year in September to include and grant membership to the African Union for the into the Group of 20. The Group of 20 summit will be held in September this year in Delhi. And joining me is Republic Senior Executive Editor Abhishek Kapoor. Abhishek, your thoughts on this? The Prime Minister taking this bold step, granting the African Union their request on his part, putting that forward that they be made full members of the G20.
Well, Rukma, again, so this is a big development insofar as India's strategic positioning is concerned. We have always believed that the global architecture, both in terms of its politics and security measures, is so heavily skewed in favor of the victors of World War II. And since then, the world has changed so much that the unrepresented needs to be heard and represented in these institutions. So India has been batting strongly for United Nations reform, specifically the United Nations Security Council. And we never speak just for ourselves. We say that, for example, such a big continent like Africa, it needs to be represented in the UNSC. Asia needs to be diversified in terms of its representation, and that's why India. So I think in that sense, and India has taken the opportunity of its G20 presidency to really broad-base these conversations and discussions, which ultimately impact the global growth, development, and security trajectory. So we have sort of projected that we are the voice of the global South. Typically, if you see, the North is the developed part of the world and the South is the underdeveloped or developing part of the world. And we have sort of tried to present ourselves a picture of a global South. And that's why, for example, apart from African Union being invited to the G20, all events, Egypt has been invited as one nation, just giving broad-basing the engagement with Africa. So while we have a lot of pontification coming in from the West when it comes to Africa, we are actually getting into the nuts and bolts and getting African Union and the African nations involved as part of this, a bold measure being taken by the Prime Minister, writing individually to all the leaders of G20 nations, which is 19 countries plus, of course, the European Union, and then the institutions that are part of the G20, like the IMF and the World Bank and the UN, of course, and the Prime Minister writing to these leaders and asking them whether they would agree that the African Union should be made a full-fledged member of G20 at the upcoming Leaders Summit, which is slated for September in New Delhi. It's going to be a big event, and for India to be making this statement, of course, African Union is invited, but then to make them a permanent member of G20 is something that's going to be a huge development in terms of broad-basing the global growth trajectory, development trajectory, getting more geographies involved, and making it equitable and democratic institution rather than a talk shop that, for example, G7 became between the world's rich nations. So I think in that sense, it's a very significant diplomatic outreach made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a personal letter going to G20 leaders and asking them to make African Union a full member of G20 at the upcoming Leaders Summit.
Right, Abhishek. Many thanks for putting perspective on this brave new development. India on the forefront, leading from the front in the matter of ensuring that global bodies like the G20, like the United Nations, putting its voice forward, that they have multiple voices and are representative of the entire world and not just a select few. Many thanks, Abhishek, once again. Well, there's more news that's coming in from